Hi, and welcome to the Guest List podcast. I'm your host, Steve Guest, and I'm really excited and energized for today's guest. For those of you who haven't listened to an episode before within this podcast was set up off the back of my first book, which was Top Biller, The Life of a Recruiter. And I was getting lots of questions about high performance, resilience, how to empower and motivate individuals. And I set about trying to disrupt the market and add value back to my growing network of followers and listeners. And hence came the Guest List podcast. And I went out to the market and asked all of you who you'd like to listen to and for me to get onto the podcast. And this person is certainly one of those individuals that I know will bring great value. So I'm going to read through this person's bio. For those of you that know this person, you will most surely guess who it is. So today's guest is a business performance specialist and asks the questions that most others shy away from. This person challenges your options and helps you find more opportunities. It connects you with the right collaborative partners you didn't even know that you needed. Today's guest provides that vital external insight through a powerful combination of one-to-one coaching, non-executive thinking and masterminding to achieve maximum results for you personally and professionally. His absolute passion is working with clients, helping them uncover and follow the best path for them, supported by the right team for the way ahead. Nobody should be struggling in isolation or without the right support network. As a business and performance coach and author, he has in excess of 2,000 hours of logged coaching hours, 25 years experience in the UK and overseas, assisting individuals and businesses to perform better and achieve more, taking teams and individuals to higher levels, working with C-grade through to entrepreneurs and individuals alike. Add to that the weekend warrior challenges, including Scotland's toughest one-day endurance race, the quadrathlon, the English Channel Relay Swim in 2015, and many others. Be unique, be authentic, be a little bit weird, and then you become memorable. A huge welcome to today's guest, Mr. Mike Pagan. Welcome along.
Thank you for that. Be a little bit weird. Yeah,
I love that.
I can't say more than that. That definitely sums me up.
Yeah, no, but for me, I think it's about being authentic. It's about being you and being comfortable who you are. And if you're a little bit weird as well, even better.
Well, that's the difference though, because what you perceive is weird to you because other people don't do it is what puts a smile on your face.
Yeah.
And because you wouldn't do it. Yeah. And so it's sort of over the years when you go back to school days when sort of people were rude to the nerds or they were rude to the emos or the goths, and it's sort of all this stereotyping. But if that's what put a smile on your face, and then that's what gets your energy, your mojo going, then be it, do it, have fun with it,
and be comfortable with it.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
We spend a lifetime, I suppose, not allowing our true nature to come out sometimes because we're frightened or worried about what someone else might think. And actually, it makes the world a far more colourful and better place if you embrace it.
I know we haven't even started yet. We're already going. There's one of my old friends going back years ago, and when in my early 20s, just starting in the corporate world I was working in those days, and he was doing very well with a certain chocolate manufacturer in the UK. Can't think who. And basically he turned around to me and said, you're going to have to stop being flippant and making a joke of stuff because nobody will take you seriously in the business world if you continue doing that. So at which point I listened to what he said and I put my personality in a box, and I became this corporate clone, and sort of it's that whole Jekyll and Hyde of where the real person and the company person were two totally different individuals. And it took me a lot of years to get rid of that because you suddenly realize, no, actually it's the uniqueness that people buy. It's the individual that people want to work with, not some clone that hasn't got an opinion or a spine or anything else to work with. And it was a fascinating journey. And that was the advice back in those days.
So true,
don't be an individual.
Yeah, it's so true. I think we all in some ways put a mask on at certain times, and it's that what we expect people to see or work with, and actually just being yourself allows you to do things in a better way because you're more in tune with it.
Well, let's be fair, Steve. Not everybody at school liked you. Yeah, and that can be said about all of us. So I'm not being rude before anybody thinks, oh, he's really starting off nasty, isn't he?
How did you know that, Mike?
I've seen the reports.
Yeah.
But that's the point. So if and this is where that illness of perfectionism comes in, because perfectionism means the pass mark is 100%. Well, then you're doomed for failure, because you're never ever going to hit that. So when it comes to sort of networking, when it comes to doing business, when it comes to meeting a future life partner or whatever it is, that there are so many people that you won't get you because you're too short, too tall, too blue, too green, whatever it is. That's fine. Let's just move on.
Just accept it. Okay, so my first question to you, I've got your book here, Mental Wealth, which you can get on Amazon in all good bookshops.
Yeah, it's available. Amazon, Waterstones, all of that lot, or through my website, or for LinkedIn, so all over the place.
It's entitled Mental Wealth. What do you mean by mental wealth?
Okay, perfect way to start, because mental wealth does need an explanation. Clearly, it's a play on the language of mental health. But to start off with, I am not a mental health practitioner, nor am I a counsellor. Okay, so with that advice, so for me, mental wealth is about having the right support network around us that's fit for purpose for what we're doing going forward. So it's proactively choosing the right people that are there, that have really got your back and will work with you. And if we do that, then that goes into our mental wealth bank account. So when things go wrong, because having a positive mental wealth team doesn't mean to say that things won't go wrong. What it means is that when things go wrong, you're going to bounce back more effectively. You're going to ride those bumps, and that's because you know that these other people have got your back, which means you can be open, honest, vulnerable, and real with them. Talking about your fears, talk about your excitements, talk about the directions and everything else like that, because you know they've got your back. Rather than random strangers who I don't really trust them, know them well enough, or actually she's a bit of a, or he's a bit of a, so I can't honestly say that. Yeah,
and it can be quite difficult to find the right people as well, can't it? And ensure that they've definitely got you back. I'm talking from personal experience in, let's say, my introduction to recruitment 16 years ago. Recruitment as a role was very much about ring fencing your market. So you would ring fence your clients and candidates. You perhaps wouldn't share information or collaborate even internally with people.
Not even internally. No, it was proper.
It was this is mine, and if I don't place this great candidate, nobody else is going to do it because I want the fee, I want the placement. And you almost become so selfish in your thought process that actually you struggle to share anything with anyone because you feel you have to control it.
Yes, it's that total insular focus of it was the same. I was in the hotel industry for a number of years, and to the point, and this, I know this will have happened and probably continues to happen with some firms in the recruitment world, when a particular hotel chain was having problems, because every year or two they'd have a problem, one of the big ones. We actually set up a war room in the basement of one of the hotels, and it was attack Marriott or attack Fort, whatever the group was. Let's attack Holiday Inn, and they're just ringing every single client that has used multiple hotel groups and just say nasty things about the other one. Oh well, they're clearly messing up. We'll have and it was just this war room mentality, and that war room went on in the recruitment world as well. Just that ugly edge of sales, of hunger, of that phone, buy. No, okay. And nobody looks out for each other. It becomes real snake oil and ugly. Whereas the flip side of it is, it's the long-term relationships. It's the support, and that's what brings people out and makes them different, rather than just a quick buck.
Yeah, completely. And I think certainly the pandemic, the fact that it's changed the landscape of the environment, I think has really helped the recruitment world. And I think as a whole, we've become better at understanding the people around us and actually being a bit more collaborative. I set up a free Facebook group last year. Was it last year? Might be the year before. During the pandemic, in terms of trying to get recruiters on a global scale together, where we swapped ideas, we were collaborative, we supported each other. We had things like hashtag Rant Tuesday, where we could come in and have a moan, but feel safe that we were having a moan because we needed to get it off our backs. Wednesday was called hashtag Collaboration Wednesday. So if we registered vacancies we couldn't fill or outside our market or niche, we could share them. And the same with if we got candidates we couldn't place, or questions or problems we couldn't solve. And then Fridays was called hashtag Winners Fridays, and it was about sharing what had gone well, what you'd achieved that week. It might be just going for a run. It might be something as simple as that. But
this is that isolation piece that you are fixing by doing that, because my language I always focus on is isolation kills creativity and prevents decision making. Yeah. And as a result of us not making decisions, that can in turn go on to procrastination and faffing about, which funnily enough, I wrote a book on faffing about, which took me 5 years to write. So the story goes, but it's that journey. It takes forever, but that then goes on and turns into a detrimental effect on our mental health. Yeah, because we're not making progress. We've not got people around us, and every single one of the listeners today, we're all on a mental health spectrum. Yeah, that's the reality. Today we woke up with a smile on our face. Tomorrow it's not such a good smile, or it wasn't yesterday. Yeah. We all ebb and flow and yo-yo. And the problem with COVID and the pandemic and us all being locked down at different points is that if you think of the heart rate monitor that goes up and down with highs and lows and everything else, the highs over the last 2 years haven't happened. Yeah, because you couldn't, you were locked down. So the parties didn't happen, the socials didn't happen, the friend, the bon ami, et cetera, et cetera. So our range dropped, and our average space meant that we were sort of just bumbling along. And without people reaching out, being open, honest, setting up safe Facebook groups where you can have a rant and a sing song or whatever it is you need to do, then suddenly that isolation just goes and it builds and it manifests further. And that's why so many people are exhausted now, because they've just been hammering it, and they need to take a step away and look after themselves.
All of that rings true. I mean, we had a quick chat just off air, and I had a bit of a troubled year health-wise last year, where I was in hospital with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and it was dangerously high. And I'm now taking tablets and everything else to do it. But we actually met through the For Business Networking, which is a golf networking group for those that don't know. And we've only known each other a matter of weeks, but I can already see the value that the conversations we can have, because I took up golf to get more fresh air, get my steps in, and actually get me away from the office for a few hours. Because I was getting up at 6:30 in the office for 7, getting home 6:30, married with 2 kids and a little puppy. I've got things going on outside of work, but my head's buried in making sure I do everything I need to do in the office. And it's finding that balance.
Well, this is where, if I focus on sort of my number one rule, for want of a better phrase, is about self-care. And we have to really hone in on self-care, because when we look after ourselves properly, then we are fit for purpose for other things. And that includes the priority. So I jokingly have said for many years that I'm number 6 in my family. Wife, 3 children, and a dog. And actually, I'm currently number 15 in the family, because there's 8 puppies as well. But that's another story which we might touch on in a minute. But either way, I wasn't prioritizing myself. And it's not about being selfish in the ugly word of selfish. This is about looking out for yourself. And that means we need to do what works for us to rebuild, to reboot, whether that be looking at nutrition, whether it be meditation and mindfulness, whether it be health, fitness, activity, whatever it is. And we need to do that stuff. And some of the time, we can't motivate ourselves to do it. So we need to hire a coach, or join a gym, or join a club, or get into a community that goes out dog walking every morning. Whatever it is that works for you, the individual, and then stick with it, because that's where the difference comes in, when you're sticking to it.
But that is also the struggle, isn't it? And I think one of my struggles is I do everything to make sure my family and kids and everything around me has opportunities and the ability to be secure and safe. And I take that on my shoulders. And I think effectively that does from a psychological perspective, it puts me down the value list.
And that's just because as a father, as a husband, whatever else you're describing, I've got to put the pants on the outside of my trousers, be Superman, make all the income I can to support and make it all work. But the reality check is when you're in flow and you're firing, it's because you've taken time away. There's many the good old cliched story about the guy sharpening his axe and all those other things that go on. We know them. But the reality for me is I have never been able to do meditation or mindfulness.
Yeah.
I can't sit still.
Yeah.
Yep. Or if I sit still, I'll fall asleep.
Yeah.
So because I used to do a lot of mileage years ago, so I learned how to power nap.
Yeah.
And so I can just do 10 minutes sitting in a chair, perfect, and then I'm fresh as a daisy again.
Yeah.
But actually, for me, what I worked out was, and I know you mentioned it in the introduction, but I was part of the fastest men's relay team to swim the English Channel a few years ago. And I don't tell you that to brag. I tell you that because it was one of those, wouldn't it be great to have done?
Yeah.
And we talked about, wouldn't it be great? And it wasn't happening. And then we decided, right, we're going to do it. Got 6 of us together. The team was called the Warwick 250 because I'm based in Leamington, Warwickshire. And that was the approximate total age of the team. So it wasn't young people. Yeah. I was 45 when I did it.
Yeah.
But what I learned from doing it is that actually I have practiced active meditation for years in the art of swimming.
Okay.
Be that in a pool, be that in a lake, be that in a sea, be in a river, whatever it is. And when you're just going stroke after stroke after stroke, and you get over the cold and you stop worrying about a shark being in a lake in England, because they don't exist.
Yeah.
And you just, but by the time you get out, you've gone into that flow, you've gone into that zone, your brain has switched off, which is what meditation is.
Yeah.
Now, the brain never actually switches off, but it's just because it clears.
Yeah.
And okay, you've got the exhilaration of the cold water as well, which adds an extra bonus to it.
Yeah.
By the time you get, you're feeling brilliant. Well, I've done stuff like that for years, be that climbing, be that out walking, running, playing rugby, all the sports. Now, sport isn't for everybody. So, but for those listening, going, well, I don't care about sports. Yeah. I've got injuries. I've got whatever. It's finding what works for you and then doing it repetitively.
That's such a great essay. I mean, I've always been a sporty person, played hockey for 25, 30 years. And I used to love the fact that on a Saturday, you can turn up, you blow the cobwebs away because you've sat at the desk all week, and you might have, 70, 80 minutes of a bit of argy-bargy and a bit of shouty, whatever else. And you kind of clear your mind because you're not thinking about anything else.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, as you grow older, your knees stop working as well as they used to. People get faster and you sit there and realise you never actually had any skill anyway. And now you've got no pace either, hence the need for golf. But I think you need that breakaway part, don't you? Whatever that might be. And I've never kind of seen it as perhaps that's my meditation, because I can't do mindfulness. I get bored so quickly.
It's part of what we do to reboot and reprocess, refuel, all the other words we could throw out there. But it's understanding, because this is self-care. We're looking after ourselves. And by doing that, so I would get up and go and swim in a lake at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And that, the positive byproduct of that, not just of not disturbing the rest of the family and coming back with fresh bread and all those sort of things that you do. Yeah. But it also meant that on a Saturday night, I would stop drinking earlier.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than being in a lake and burping up Rioja. It's not nice.
Yeah, that's not a good place, is it?
Yeah. So, but it's joking aside, so things like that, it has another positive effect on you because you're easing off in other areas. And so it's just, for me, that works. And I can't emphasize too much that people just need to work out what it is that works for them.
Yeah.
And the generation above me, it was all gardening, a lot of people. And the time they spent, they'd lose hours. My father-in-law still is an avid gardener, and he's very good at it, admittedly, as well. But it's okay, well, if that works for you, then do it.
Yeah.
If you happen to be 25 years old and you've got green fingers and thumbs and it works for you, don't be embarrassed about it. Just get on with it. Whatever works for you.
Okay. And we move into things in terms of, you've got yourself sorted. You've started to understand that you need to prioritize and value self-care. And then you get to a point where you think, okay, how do I move forward now? Have I got the right people in the right places?
Mm.
How do you go about that? How do you know that you've got the right areas looked after?
Oh, well, there's a starting point before this.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to know who's got our back now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to establish our support network and work out who has truly got our back, or are we just a name?
Yeah.
And I will actually help people understand the difference between somebody who's there for a reason or somebody who's got your back. Because somebody who's there for a reason, it could be because of school, it could be because of sport, it could be whatever else. But if you damage yourself, get injured, and you don't play that sport for 2 months, they don't pick up the phone, they don't ring you, they don't get in touch. Then you turn up and they say, "Oh, hi, Steve, how you doing? Where you been? Oh, you broke your leg. I didn't know that. Oh, well, good to see you again." That's an acquaintance, or that's somebody there for a season for something specific. These are what we need to be doing is that inner sanctum, the people where we are comfortable being open, honest, and transparent with, and we trust them with that information because we're comfortable doing that. And there'll be some people listening who haven't got anybody who ticks those boxes. I create a sort of a subjective scoring mechanism to help people establish that. And if you are starting with zero, that's fine. We start asking better questions of the people around us to find the right ones. And if you've got multiple people that are there, okay, are they all fit for purpose going forward? Because being a sporty person, I had the joys of working with professional and elite sportsmen and women transitioning to their life after their sporting career. And some of the stuff I really established there was yesterday, before retirement, they had 35 people keeping them on the track, in the pool or on the pitch or whatever else. The guillotine comes down and all of those people are no longer fit for purpose going forward. So who now has got their back to help them achieve, to be brilliant, to be awesome? They don't, identity, direction, all of these things disappear overnight when that guillotine comes down.
That's quite a scary moment, I would think.
It totally. But the scary thing is, what I established was that transition happens to us all.
Yeah.
It might not be quite so obvious as coming out of the military or retiring from professional sport. But when we transition from different stages in our lives between management and senior management, from a student to apprentice, to from school to university, whatever it is, we being selfish, footloose, and spontaneous and fancy-free to suddenly becoming a parent. That one's a transition.
Yeah.
And when you're going through multiple transitions throughout our lives, that means there are certain times where we have to leave people behind. And that's not about dumping old people, old friends or old contacts. It's just realizing that I need Claire 2.0 because the existing Claire isn't going to be part of my support going forward. And that's okay. Yeah, but we evolve, and and a lot of people are allergic to change because it's scary. But when we ask the better questions and we realize that we need Claire 2.0, all right, well, what does Claire 2.0 need? Look like, smell like, feel like, cost, whatever else it is. If we need a professional setup, then right, let's pull those people in. And if we don't know that person, then we ask others that we already trust who Claire 2.0 is, so that they can introduce us, because we already trust them. So an introduction coming from that person means it's a chemistry check and it's a dig in and it's finding out.
It's so true. And I've been on my own personal journey. I would say it probably started around 2012, 2013. So our oldest son is 9 now. He'll be 10 next year. And it was probably around the same time when you get a bit of responsibility, you feel like you're doing things for someone else. And it's not necessarily just for you or the wife. And I was looking at potential mentors and coaches and who do I have around me? Who do I delegate certain things to? Who's going to be able to take certain tasks off my hand? And it can be quite tricky. And I think sometimes people are either too frightened to get a coach or a mentor because it means they don't know it all. And they're frightened to say, actually, I need someone else to help me.
Asking for help, sign of weakness.
Yeah, 100%. And I think other parts of me, well, what if I pick a coach and they're not right for me, or I get a few months down the line and it's not working, or can I then get rid of a coach and get a new one because this one's doing this? And you have all these thoughts. And then I think ultimately you get to a point where you don't do anything because you're frightened of upsetting someone or picking wrong or doing the wrong thing. But it's an evolution, isn't it? And that's what I've learned.
Totally. My coach, he's really irritating because he's a trained psychologist as well. So he knows
what you're going to say before you say it.
Exactly. But joking aside with that one, I wrote an article a few years ago now on how to sack your coach. Okay. And he rang me. He said he's trying to tell me something. I said no, because look at what I've written, and do we fit that what I was describing in there? Because it's when a coaching relationship becomes an expensive fireside chat, then they're not challenging you, they're not provoking you, they're not getting things. But the beauty about having a coach, and you mentioned the word mentor, and I just for clarity, this is how I translate these. A counselor will dig into your back history and understand what have been the positives and negatives throughout your life and how they still play out or carry with them. And that's why you need to be very well trained as a counselor to do that. The mentor is, I've built a business, I created this environment, learn from my mistakes, learn from my successes. I'll give you my prescription, my recipe, and copy and mirror it and follow it, and I'll help you along the way. The consultant is, I've got a project, I've got a problem, come in, write me a brief on how I should fix this, and then we'll pay you a bit more and you can implement it. And if it's successful, we'll take the credit. And if it goes wrong, it's the consultant's fault. We know it. And then the final area is the coach. And the coach, in my translation, is I'm an applied coach, which means I have a blank piece of paper. And it's sort of, okay, where are you trying to get to? What are you trying to do? What are the options? All right, so we've got 3 options. Which one really resonates with you? How are we going to? All right, so you're going to do option C. How does that look? And so instead of turning up with a recipe that I think somebody else should be cooking by, it's helping them develop their own. And obviously there are times where you do dip into each of the other 3 characters. Yeah. But fundamentally, I sit in the coach, or non-exec coach, as I would call it as well. Yeah. But then there's other times where, you've got to be a consultant. You've got to ask the ugly. So that means when you're recruiting a coach, you've got the chemistry check to start off with. I joke when I speak at events, when I speak in schools on occasions, you turn around and say, I know some of you already hate me. And these kids are also, what? 35, 50 of them, whatever it is in a room, all 15, 16-year-olds, arms crossed. Oh God, who's this? I just turn around and say, all right, so I'm some old git from out of town who sounds like your dad, looks like your granddad. You already hate me. You decided you don't want to be here. But actually, he's addressing my concerns right from the start. So maybe I'll give him another 30 seconds before I decide if I truly hate him or not. Yeah.
I imagine that goes down pretty well.
But that's the chemistry check. Yeah. That we do that in business. We do that via Zoom. Yeah. We'll look at the backgrounds that people have on Zooms and say, oh, well, I can't quite read that one at the moment. Or that's a dodgy photograph. Oh, they could have tidied their office. All of those things. Well, we make these initial things, and that's the chemistry. Yeah. Does the language somebody's using resonate or irritate? Are they going to motivate, inspire, and cajole me and hold me accountable to things I'm going to do and help me achieve more? Are they going to notice my self-sabotaging habits and help me replace those habits with a better one? Because one of my neuroscientist friends always turns around and says, when it comes to habits, you can't break a habit. You have to replace it with something better. Yeah. Okay. That's why some people, when they give up smoking, it's because of a catastrophic event in their lives, i.e. they've been told they've got an illness because of the smoking. Okay, so replacing the habit with life suddenly becomes a better habit to have than smoking the tabs.
That's so true. You made some good points there. I think in terms of, when I go to the gym, I struggle to be self-motivated and go to the gym and actually enjoy it. I need a PT. I need someone that he's waiting for me at the door to say, come on, it's 5:05. Why are you late? And then make sure I do the exercises. I've found over the years, I'm very good at talking to a PT to get out of doing an exercise I don't enjoy. Yeah. And I can get them talking. And I have to now say at the start, if it's
Steve, you're in recruitment and you've got a sales background and you're trying to say to me, oh, I confess, I can wriggle out of situations. Really? I'm not surprised.
But I now, so we've just joined a new gym up the road from us, and I had my first PT session, and I opened the introduction with, if you find me talking too much and you get it, the fact that I'm trying to get out of doing a certain exercise, just tell me to shut up. I won't take offense, but you need to do it, because I will find a way to not do something, or, oh, it's 6 o'clock already, we'll have to do this one next week. And I'll get out of it.
It's the wriggle. One of the things I've done for years is that whole part of daily activities, some of the challenges. And like I did one last year in the first lockdown of 100,000 skip challenge.
Okay.
And I couldn't, and I'm still not a very good skipper, but I couldn't skip at the start of this. And it was 100 skips a day, week 1, 200 skips a day, week 2, and so on. If you miss the day, you have to double up. If you get keen today, you can't carry over though.
Okay.
Yeah. So it meant at the end of 10 weeks, which is pretty much, it was when I stopped, because I thought I'm not going to go any higher. But it meant that I was doing 1,000 skips a day, and how that worked. Now I've done stuff like that for years, whether it be press ups, whether it be chin ups, whether it be other things, because they're just, but it's the no banking rule and catching up. And so I can, this is an irritating one for some, but I enjoy it. In the last 20 years, I've done press ups every single day, except one.
Except one day?
Yeah. Well, I was swimming the channel, so I had an excuse, I thought.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably fair enough.
So the story goes, clearly I've missed other days, but I've always caught up.
That's really good.
So it's things like that. It's just, but that's a self-inflicted discipline, habit, whatever you want to call it. But it's translating that into the work environment. If you've got to do 1,200, 1,300 calls a year, well, that's 5 a day or 3 a day. It's not big, but it's the cumulative effect of how that builds up.
Yeah.
And that's where people just find the disciplines. And that comes from a coach, that comes from a mentor, it comes from other people, right? Where are we finding these things? Because as you've just said, you wriggle, you squirm, you get out of it, because that's what we do, because we don't like it so much. So let's work it another way.
Yeah. I often talk, and when I'm helping recruiters and coaching them in terms of that, the compound effect. And you mentioned something there that I often discuss, in that if you're targeted to do certain things, so whether it's a fee target or an activity KPI target, if you've got a plan over a 12-month period and you break it down into smaller components, it becomes far more achievable. 5 calls a day. There isn't a salesperson on the planet that shouldn't struggle to do 5 calls a day. But if you think, I did 5 calls a day this year, every day, and I did this, imagine if I did 6 calls a day next year.
Yep.
The cumulative effect and overall achievement will be a lot bigger than 1 extra call a day. But people don't necessarily do that.
But what you're describing here, and this is the foundations of coaching, which is behavioral change. Yeah. And behavioral change will not happen, will not take place without an emotional connection. So your description there of moving from 5 calls a day to 6. Okay, so 5 calls a day has now created the opportunity where there's that 25 grand bonus has come in at the end of the year. So let's move that up a grand. Do you want an extra 5, an extra 10 next year? Well, that's the emotional connection, because that's going to pay for your holiday to the Bahamas or wherever it is you want to go. So suddenly we're building that emotional connection to the enjoyment of that situation as a result of the positive reinforced habit that you do throughout the whole year.
Yeah, I love it. This week in the office, we've been talking about how we reward success. And to me, to have something, so we were talking off air about the fact I've got my first ever custom fit golf clubs.
Yep.
That has come from the fact that I've put a plan in place.
They are right-handed, aren't they?
They are right-handed, yeah.
Just checking.
Yes, they are. I've got that because I've got things in place that have allowed me to work maybe that little bit harder, maybe a little bit more smarter, but it's got me to a point where I can now go and do something that rewards me for doing an extra element or achieving the targets I set out to achieve. And I have this ethos in our office that we never say things like we can't afford to do that. We'd never be able to do that. Why would we ever think about doing that? And it's not that. That's the wrong question. The question is, how do we afford that? How do we get to that? And we work it out in simple forms. It might not be something for tomorrow. It might be 5 years, 10 years time. But it's about making sure there's a plan in place that's written, that's calculated, that's measured, and we can go out and start to achieve things, whether it is one extra call a day.
And within the world of recruitment, which the majority of your listeners are, but in the world of business, it is putting those measurable, tangible, commercial elements to what we're doing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen if we're not in the right space, if we're not balanced. We haven't got asking for help. We joked earlier is not a sign of weakness. It is absolutely what helps us grow and become more successful. People will change jobs. And I know a recruitment firm local to me, and the guy who's run it for the years, every single time he's lost a member of staff, goes into a personal crisis meltdown because he's given so much to the relationship. And it's just, there's a population of people that move on and that work, but it's whether it's moving to a competitor or out of the industry or whatever it is, it's knowing how that balance is set up with the right professional team behind you, the right contracts in place, all of those areas, so that you can, if you know you've got a professional team behind you along with the coach, then you're able to make braver decisions because you know full well it's not going to bite you in the bum later, or if it does, we've got the ammunition to deal with it. So whether you're doing that from the perspective of a really poorly worded employment contract and you want to leave versus your staff are not, well, it works for both sides of that equation, having the right advice, not always on speed dial, but there for you.
You've got people that back you up. You know you've got a safe place to have the tougher conversations, for good and bad. And I think that takes time. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, because you will have people that you think are there and they're not. And you don't necessarily know until a situation or scenario presents itself. And then you truly find out, I think.
But when you have that professional team that are asking better questions of you than you can on your own. I always use the story of my property investing in the noughties, which some went right, but 15 years after I put the original deposit down, I completed on the property in Cyprus in 2020. Yeah, that some don't go right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was because I dodged or avoided taking independent legal advice, which would have cost me a few hundred.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, cost me tens of thousands per year for 15 years.
Oh my days.
Yeah. So in hindsight and reflection, we see what happens, but those relationships I now proactively seek out, and I seek them from the wealth team, from the legals, from the accountants, and I have all of those guys talking to each other as well.
Yeah.
So that you are then, what is best practice for me, for my business, for my family, for our development, our situation.
Yeah.
And then I know full well that if I've got a situation that arises, I've got people I can talk to and say, that doesn't fit what we're trying to build. Yeah. Or critical life cover is something we've been looking at this year. Can't think why. But it's one of those, I got quotes through from my wealth manager. I was just checking them through, and I said, well, have you looked at this one as well that I've looked up? And he said, haven't you written a book about trusting your professional network to give you the best advice and support? So why that bleep, bleep, bleep?
Yeah.
Are you checking out other stuff? What's the point in me doing it?
Yeah.
To which I took the wet fish that he slapped across my face, got back in my box, and took his advice accordingly.
But it's so true, isn't it? And I think over my probably the last 9 years, I've become that person that's gone out to seek that advice. And whether I've got involved with property investment and obviously within the recruitment world as well, and other things, podcasts, producing your podcast, you go out to find people that do it, have been there, trodden the path, and you ask the questions and you seek the advice so that your road is less troubled and you're not feeling like you've got to do it all on your own.
Yeah.
I don't think that comes naturally to a lot of people. I think it has to be something that's learned. And it's quite often it's you putting yourself into a position or an environment where perhaps you are the least informed person in a room. And you don't necessarily want to ask them embarrassing questions either.
But we don't need that knowledge.
No.
Why do I need to know how to make widgets? I want the car to work. Yeah. So when it comes to a car, we accept the fact that you do or don't. Either you are a car buff or you're not. So move on. So when it comes to HR, do we think we have to meddle? Or when it comes to finances, or whatever, get the experts in. And yeah, there are certain ones that we have to pay for. There are other ones that we don't have to. But it's when you've got that team and they're proactively there for you, then opportunities arise. You've got the people who will turn around and say, that's a great way forward. That's not. A classic one, just where it goes wrong. My daughter is at university. She was diagnosed dyslexia last year and gets all this extra support, which is brilliant. But within that, though, there's IT support and other things like that. She was sent a 45-page document on what they were offering and how it would work. This was to somebody who suffers with dyslexia. Yeah, you don't send it. It just was, I'm not going to read that. Got no idea. So it's knowing who you've got around you that can help, rather than Muppets just going through things that clearly doesn't work. And it just really, it tickled me because the irony of it. But
the thought hasn't been throughout the whole process, has it?
5 headlines in bold, no other detail. Done.
Job
sign here.
In terms of you, Mike Pagan, and the influencers and the various people you've had around you, who would you say have perhaps been, I don't know, the 2 or 3 most inspiring or motivating or empowering people that have helped you get to where you've got to?
Interesting question. There's a situation where I'd say that this ebbs and flows for me. And that's, you mentioned earlier that I'm involved with masterminding. Mm-hmm. And masterminding is the peer support group. Some people might know it as learning and development, action learning sets. But it's when you have a close-knit crew of people that you give permission to them to ask you better questions about you, your career, your direction, your focus, your business, whatever it is. And then you do the same for them. Mm-hmm. But it's all done in total confidence. So what goes on in that room stays in that room. So it's Chatham House rule, and it's so potent. And as those relationships build and develop, then these people potentially become very good friends as well. But they truly understand what's going on, because they say, well, Steve, if I was running your business, I'd do these 2 things, and Bob, and so on. And it's within that environment, meeting monthly, every month, year after year, you can really build some very powerful support. Mm-hmm. And so whilst the names are irrelevant to somebody else, as a result of it, it can be very potent to the point. There's a colleague of mine who had a member of his mastermind team who had a terminal cancer diagnosis, sadly, but he went to his mastermind group to discuss the way forward for him before he spoke to his family, because he wanted independent advice and support from people he truly trusted. Before he then went to the family to deal with what would then become a very emotionally challenged discussion and debate. But it gave him that support. And so for me, masterminding very much is the way of working. And then the other one, there's a particular man who, he doesn't know it, but he changed my life. And this is a story. It does take a few moments, but back in the 1950s and early 60s, my father used to live in Singapore. Okay. As a bachelor. So he was in the rubber plantations in Malaysia and so on, and heavily involved in Singapore Cricket Club. Didn't play cricket. He was the umpire. So he was very good at putting one finger up. But one of his mates then left Singapore and moved to Bangkok to set up a container business, logistics and so on. And he moved back to the UK. 2 months after coming back to the UK, met my mother. They got married, yada, yada. 1999, I'm just packing up to move to Australia for a few years. He talks to his friend in Bangkok who says, you really should tell Mike to look up my mate Newton in Perth in Australia. He's a great guy. We did some land deals in the 1970s. If he's got any connections or support, he'll try and help.
Okay.
2 months after I get into Australia, I'd been doing the corporate world prior to that. So it took 2 months initially arriving to travel, get to know my daughter at that stage. Then I'm knocking on Newton's door. He says, come on in, mate. Feeling a little bit crook. Just had my first dose of chemo, but I'll happily have a chat and see what we can do.
Okay. He
was considering investing in a business that was a dot-com business. They had great IQ, but they were lacking in commercial skills. Instead of me investing, why don't I plug you in there? The guys couldn't afford a decent salary at that stage. It was a startup.com. So I got pocket money and golden handcuffs. 3 years later, I moved back to the UK. 3 years after that, that business bought me out of the shareholding I'd acquired. Wasn't life-changing amounts, but it's still part of it. I went on into a totally different career path. I took an MBA whilst I was in Oz, and I set up in the world of coaching, non-exec support, and so on. And this is 20 years ago now. Newton died 3 months after I met him.
Okay.
I had this narrowest window of opportunity, all relating to my father being a bachelor drunk in Singapore in the late 50s and early 60s. But that connection categorically changed my life. I tell that story because that's the power of the network, not the power of bacon rolls at 7 o'clock in the morning and passing business cards. That's the power of using your network and the connections that come out of it. And that was totally life-changing.
That is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just those conversations that moved, that has now got you to where you are now.
And as I say, he has no idea what happened as a result of that.
Yeah.
Because he was gone long after, 3 months after I first met him. So, yeah.
Word. Okay. So in terms of any extracurricular things, are there, other than people going out and purchasing your book?
Yeah. Please do that. I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah. Are there any other books or anything out there that you would recommend people go and have a look at? Do you have videos that people can go and?
Yeah. Well, the simple bit for me, Mental Wealth is my fourth book. Mm-hmm. So I've written books on productivity, faffing about. There's one on Is Your Business Fit for Purpose? Another one was a co-authored book around the business of professional speaking, and I did an element in there on marketing, getting exposure. So there's all sorts of noise out there if people are so inclined. If you want to connect with me, then LinkedIn would probably be the best way. But please say that you've hooked up via Steve Guest, because that and personalize your request, so I know. Otherwise, you know what it's like. If it's bland and it doesn't come through, then those conversations can start. I will always refer to one specific book, though, that I've read over the last couple of years, and it's called The Choice. It's a Nazi Holocaust survivor, and just the choices that she made through her life, and the problems and the challenges and everything else. It's inspiring. It's scary. It's the reality of it. And it just changes our whole focus on what you're doing. Just puts us back in our box a bit, because we live in the Western world. We're privileged. We've got vaccinations that other countries, all of these things going on. So it's just get yourself back in the books and understand who and what and how. We
all have a habit of taking things for granted. And I think sometimes it's just good to just remind us of how lucky we all are.
Absolutely.
Okay. So for all the listeners, firstly, I want to thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed that conversation. I know that will add value to anybody that listens to this episode. If there was a single piece of advice, if there was one thing that people should take from this podcast, what would that be? Okay. And I know we talked about this briefly beforehand, and you said, okay, if you must. I focus in on three things. Firstly is work out who is in your support network that is no longer fit for purpose, and move on. I'm not saying dump and run and stop being friendships and whatever else, but move your mental reliance on these people having your back.
and recruit the people that really do have. Because when we have that proactive support network around us, then number two can happen. And number two is we can have more fun. Yeah. I want to play more. I want to laugh more. I want to enjoy stuff more. And over that last 2 years of the pandemic and everything else, our fun factor has been sorely reduced. So we need to be able to do that. But if you've got to do that from a position of comfort and confidence, be that financially, mentally supportive, whatever it is, secure in your business and so on, then we need that support team. And that gives us the opportunity for more fun. But the final one, and this is the big one around mental health and positive humanity, which I know sounds like a very big, bold claim to finish with, but the challenge for us all is to ask better questions of people around us. Mm-hmm. If you've asked somebody if they're okay and their response is fine, we all know what the acronym FINE stands for or can stand for, and I'm not going to say it now. It's not positive. We need to ask better questions. And to the point of, if you have got your gut feel, your intuition is telling you, I haven't spoken to somebody for a couple of months, I should reach out, then pick up the phone. Don't send them a text. Don't send them social media. Don't spam them with something. Pick up the phone. If you live locally, go and see them. Sadly, a month ago, one of my son's friends through school was fortunately unsuccessful in a suicide attempt. On this particular day, my mate, who I was at school with donkeys years ago, and we catch up with 2 or 3 times a year, who lives in the States, rang me. And when I picked up the phone, said, I'll get to the pleasantries in a minute. Why have you rung me today? What is the reason why you've rung me? And we fished around for a few minutes and we could find no actual reason. It was just pure intuition. He rang at 5:30 in the morning, American time, because he was on his way back from the night shift. He's a doctor. So he could give me so much information about the situation that my son and the friend's family were going through. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely, I utterly needed that phone call that day. Mm-hmm. It was so powerful. So I'm not saying that when you pick up the phone, you're going to have that sort of impact on others, but it is our duty as good human beings to pick up the phone, make the effort. If our gut feel is telling us something, then step up, because then we can reduce these mental health challenges by building strong, potent mental wealth teams, mental wealth bank account, raise it. And as a result of that, we'll all have a lot more fun.
Yeah, I back that 100%. I am a firm believer that if somebody crosses your thought process, whether it's someone you haven't spoken to for a while or what, just speak to them. I love that. And I do that. I practice that as often as I can do. And I make a point of going out my way to do it.
Even to the point, some people say there's a movement, for want of a better phrase, of the random act of kindness. Yeah, tracking what have you done today to be a good citizen, a good human being. If that works for you and it pushes your buttons and it gives you, it warms your soul and makes you feel great, then do it. Yeah. This is all part of the self-care. If it works for you, then carry on. It's selfish in a good way because you're looking after number one.
I love it. That's a perfect way to end this podcast. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for your time.